Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about the slight delay. The joys of trying to do a live demo in the afternoon. Well, bearing in mind everybody's had cocktails and you've just had a session on advocacy, I'm hoping that this isn't too difficult either, because this is all about data. How many people here are fundraisers? Just a show of hands. How many people are campaigning advocacy type things? Anybody data-y in the room? Hey, I've got friends. That's always a good start. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm Anthony. I work at Actually Data and Actually Data Analytics, two organizations, one person, I promise. It's just me. I don't have multiple personality disorder, I promise. We are a Engaging Networks partner. We specialize in integration and have been working with the team at Engaging Networks now for a number of years. I knew Corin before he actually started working at Engaging Networks. That's how far Corin and I go back, bless. And I'm here with Abby.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm from Rennie Grove Peace Hospice Care. I've got about 20 years of digital marketing experience, but only 3 months in the charity sector. So I'm pretty new into this, so go easy on me, okay?
So what we're going to talk about today is Rennie Grove and Peace, who have just recently merged. We're going to talk about what they did with Engaging Networks. They've only had Engaging Networks for about 18 months. We're going to talk about what we did with the data, so looking at the data that you get out of Engaging Networks. Bear in mind, everybody's had a great afternoon so far on cocktails. I thought audience participation might be helpful. How many people look at the data that you get out of Engaging Networks? Do you look at it in CRM? Hands up for CRM analysis. Couple. How many people download the data from Engaging Networks and look at it? Another few. How many people look at the reports from the Engaging Networks environment? A small handful. That's good. So hopefully some of this is going to be useful. So yeah, we're going to just talk about what we've done in terms of taking the data out of Engaging Networks, chucking it around a bit, showing you what you can do in Power BI. Any users of Power BI in the room? That's always good. There's a couple of hands go up. That's always good. And then a couple of tips to get you started. I know fundraisers don't like data. I promise you it's not that scary. It's not that bad. There we go. So yeah, we'll just show you a couple of things and show you what some of the reports look like. Wonderful.
So Rennie Grove Peace Hospice Care is 2 different charities, Rennie Grove and Peace Hospice. We merged back last year sometime, before my time. But we're essentially we're based in Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire, and we've merged to kind of strengthen our services within the region and to reach more people within our community. As you'd expect with 2 different charities, there's lots of different systems that we're working with, so we're busy trying to merge those in at the moment, which is an interesting task. And then, so we started working with Engaging Networks back in the summer last year. Rennie Grove, before we merged with Peace, we launched a new website. So that's when we started working with them, and we're now in the process of incorporating Peace into the system. Probably one of the biggest things that I started doing when I started at Rennie Grove was to move all of the email communications into Engaging Networks, which was actually a fairly easy task. But then shortly after that, we embarked on a reconsent program. So we've obviously got 2 different subscriber databases, and we're just trying to kind of merge those together, get them to reconsent to this new database. What are we on, 20, 30%?
Yeah, about that.
About that. So we've got this lovely, small but perfectly formed database of followers who are opening their emails at an alarming rate.
Awesome. So like I said, in terms of what Actually Data brings to the party, I've been working with the team at Rennie Grove now for about 5 years. As part of the migration process, I was involved in trying to work out how the data, luckily both organizations are using Razor's Edge, so it's just a case of trying to work out and how we standardize that process. But again, we're looking at the data that comes out of Engaging Networks to try and work out what it does, what it looks like, what intelligence we can get. And I think that's the key thing here, is we're trying to understand more of what people are doing online. So why do we choose Power BI? Because it's relatively easy. It's extremely cheap for charities. So there's a charity rate in terms of Microsoft products, and I think the cost for a UK charity is about £2.30 per user per month. And not everybody in the charity needs to have a Power BI Pro license. So if you've got people designing stuff in Power BI, you probably need them. But a lot of stuff that I do for Rennie Grove is shared through Teams, and people using Power BI through Teams don't need a Power BI license. So it's only the people who are actually building reports and stuff for you that are actually going to need a pro license. So that helps in terms of the barrier to get people consuming data in that way. The good thing is it's fairly flexible, it's very pretty, there's lots of stuff that comes as standard, and you can build the things that you care about. One of the biggest challenges being a database person, I still class myself as a database person, sorry and all that, is the fact that database teams never get enough time to spend on reporting. So one of the things that we look at is how we can make it fairly self-service, so you guys can look at it and interrogate it yourself, because there's nothing worse than asking a database team to go, can you give me a report that says this? Then you get the numbers, and then you go, can you just? Because database teams just never get the time to spend on doing those types of things, and it's always one of those jobs that you have to try and fit in. Wonderful, that's enough of me talking. Who wants to see a demo of what you can do with data in Power BI? Please say yes, otherwise it's going to be a really short session. Okay, so here's one we made earlier in true classic style. Wonderful. So these are all the different types of things that we've built just taking the data out of Engaging Networks. I'm not going to go through all of the pages. I'm just going to go through a couple of slides just so you can see what's possible and how you can get started. So the first thing that we've done is taken some KPIs. So you can see how many actions. Again, remember that Rennie Grove are relatively new to Engaging Networks. So they've taken some data. This is this year's data starting financial year 23-24. They've just started working with things like the email marketing module, the new broadcast functionality. So that's how we're doing the reconsent stuff. We can see what that looks like in terms of number of emails going out, number of supporters who are engaging. We've got regular giving, so credit card transactions, regular gifts. It's a really nice thing. I mean, lots of people go back to direct debits and direct debit mandate forms, and people like Rapid Data and the rest of it. But I'm seeing lots more charities look at recurring card transactions, like the US does. So it may be something, if you're not using that functionality, it may be something you want to think about. And then Rennie Grove are using donation pages, classic donation pages, to sign up people for events. So you can get just some really top-line stuff and some simple functionality just using classic donation pages rather than needing to worry about the events module and all of that stuff. Rennie Grove do have the events module, but some of the stuff that they're doing is just through straight donation pages. You can see breakdowns of income, so we can see some top-line numbers. So far this year, we've got £48,000. If we look at last year, which is just a click of a button, there you go. We can see that from middle of the summer, so about August, September time, that's where they were. They did 187,000 through to the end of year, so end of financial year. So 50,000 so far in 2 months, just over 2 months. I don't think is too bad. We've chopped that up into things like one-off donations and events and all the other stuff. The other stuff that you can pull out of Engaging Networks is things like tracking data. So if you're using tracking codes, anybody using tracking codes and looking at how that works? You've got that. It's one of the fields in the standard account structure, so you can pull that down and start looking at what's working for you. And again, for fundraisers, it's easy if you can visualize that. You've also got devices. One of the things that I find interesting is just looking at the different types of stuff that you can do on Engaging Networks and how people are engaging on different devices. So things like donations, yeah, classic desktop. But things like email communications, people are looking at those on phones and on tablets. So again, when you're thinking about what that looks like in terms of design, it's those types of things that you may want to think about and structuring your content slightly differently for the different ways that supporters are actually engaging with that material. Lookalike data. So Camille just kindly referenced reference data that you've got in Engaging Networks. One of the things that we've done is we've taken external data sources. So we've got Acorn classifications, and we've overlaid Acorn data against what the supporters are doing online just to see how that performs and how that's different. Everybody loves a map. Microsoft have just changed mapping. So if you're used to Power BI and you've got maps, they've just changed the way that maps work. Again, Rennie Grove is a regional hospice, so that's why most of their supporters are in the middle of here, but it's not exclusively that. Again, with in-memory support, that does happen across the UK. But again, it's nice to be able to look at it and drill down, and you've got various different things that you can look at. For those of you, bearing in mind some of the sessions that we've had earlier around testing, you've got the ability to look at that data, so do campaign testing, so page versus campaign. So we're looking at do 2 different versions of a single donation site. Rennie Grove worked with the wonderful Eugene, who's at the back of the room, so some of this stuff is around what Eugene designed and how he's changed, and how that worked, and testing that we did with that. And then we've got classic RFM, so recency, frequency, value, or recency, frequency, monetary, depending on which marketing school you went to give you basically another view of what your supporters look like and how they're engaging on the site. Does that make sense? Other things that you can do is we've got slices around chopping up by date. So if you're only interested in quarters, you can chop up the reports based on classic date slices. You've got contact slices. So one of the things that we've overlaid as well as Acorn data is primary care trusts. So again, when we're talking about reference data, you may not want to do it in BI. You may want to just upload it to Engaging Networks if that's useful, if you're a medical charity and want to pull that data in. You've got other filters, so other stuff that you've got within the Engaging Networks data set that you've got are things like payment methods, tracking data we've already talked about, devices that we've already talked about, those types of things, and then successful or rejected transactions, pulling those out so your supporter care teams can go off and look at them and engage with them. And then finally, it wouldn't be a database unless you could actually export the data, so we give you a table view. So you can look at it and then pull that data out. And if, for example, you wanted to run a campaign of all the people who are lapsing, we've got RFM, you can identify the people who haven't given recently, you can pull those out, shove them back into Engaging Networks, send them a campaign. Does that make sense? Nodding gently around the room. Wonderful. So there's lots of stuff that you can do because there is lots of data that you can get out of the system. So in terms of getting started, Power Query is the way that you can transform data. So the good thing about using something like Power BI is you can blend your data. So like you've seen with the Acorn and external data sets, you can blend it. One of the things that one of my other organizations that I'm working with want to do is take in police commissioner data and run an email to target based on commissioner data sets. So I think that's the flexibility of Engaging Networks. It doesn't just have to be email to target MPs. I think that organization is probably going to look at it for changing police, or at least contacting police commissioners in the UK. So Power Query allows you to clean data, transform it, make it nice, make it beautiful, make it understandable. DAX is the functionality that allows you, it's like Excel. I say that in a loosest form. It's basically the ability to create formulas, and with those formulas, that's how you do the visualizations in Power BI. There's a lot of visualizations that you can get within Power BI. So as standard, there's probably, I don't know, 15 to 30 off-the-cuff type of charts, type of cards that you can drop in to Power BI. Work out what works for you. Work out what works for the audiences that want to engage with that. You'll see that there's lots of different types of ways to visualize data. It's not just a bar chart. It's not just a pie chart. It doesn't have to be just a line chart. Just work out what works for your audiences. And the key thing that I always say to anybody who's starting out in reporting is start small. Don't try and do everything. The number of times I go into organizations and they go, yeah, we've got these 50 KPIs that we want to measure our online platforms by. It's like, let's just take 3 of them and see where we get to and then build on it. Starting small means that you actually get to deliver something. It's the classic agile way of working. Just try and make it manageable, because otherwise you'll never get started. Wonderful.
So what's next? So our 3 main tasks for the remainder of the year, we've got Hearts 10K run, Chiltern 3 Peaks walking challenge, and then mentioning the C word, we've got Christmas appeals coming up. With all these lovely new data and reports we've got, it's just creating some test plans and some segmentation, but I think, like Anne says, it's start small. We're a pretty small, lean team, so it's not doing everything all at once, because that's when you fall over. So we're going to start some simple test plans and work from there. And then, of course, we've got our lovely, small but perfectly formed new subscriber database. So we're going to be talking to them in meaningful ways that keeps them engaged and ultimately donating. And yes, and I think the big thing for me personally is we have a team of lots of members of the team that have been there a while, and it's trying to encourage them to use the data to make decisions based on the insights in the data rather than opinions and what they've done historically. And if we can overcome that, I think we're onto a winner, right?
That's always a good start. I think one of the other things that Abby mentioned to me that she's not just mentioned is about testing for testing's sake. Just be sensible about how many tests you're going to do. There was a session earlier where we talked about testing and lots of different variables. Just try and work out what's important and then work out how you want to test that and make a plan for the period of time that you want to go through that testing. Awesome. Like I say, the wonderful Maya Angelou started, every journey begins with a single step, so just start small. Abby and I will be around for a while, and I think that's questions. There you go. Go on, please tell me there's no questions. That'll make me feel better.
Yeah, there are a number of questions. So the first one here is, are there any standard or recommended metrics, or is that all decided when you're sort of setting up and building the report?
You can do it.
Standard metrics. I think most organizations have an idea of where they're going. I would, again, try and make sure that that's a small, maybe half a dozen across the organization of things that you want to do. One organization who's been using Engaging Networks for a while basically wants to count the number of conversions, so where they're getting non-financial asks and those people converting. And it's just trying to understand what, like we said with testing, it's a case of trying to understand what is it you're trying to measure, and more importantly, how is it going to change the stuff that you're doing? Because if it's not going to change anything and you're just measuring for measuring's sake, it's not the best reason to have that data.
Another question, how do you get the data from Engaging Networks into Power BI?
That's a nice question. So I am using the bulk API. Obviously, you can use the front-end tools, and that allows you to export all of the data. So if somebody's starting off with reporting, we would normally take a first data cut, which is through the front end, and just export that out. But there is also the bulk API, which holds 31 days worth of data. So you can refresh that on a nightly basis. I think the database the reporting database that Engaging Networks uses is normally updated about every 4 hours, but I normally suggest to clients use it a day behind, unless there's something specific that you're really trying to try and work out what's going on. So if you're doing campaigning actions for something.
Great. And what is Acorn data and how is it used by charities and companies?
Sorry, apologies. Acorn data is basically lifestyle data, which is based on postcode. So it's looking at postcode analysis and trying to work out what lifestyle data that looks like. So it has 8 high-level classifications: suburbanites, urbanites, hard-pressed living. Those are the types of classifications that you get at Acorn level 1. And then underneath that, you've got another level, and then underneath that, you've got another level.
Ant, could we set this report ourselves, or would you recommend talking to you? So would it be realistic for a client to do it themselves?
Dear, oh dear. I mean, this is not meant to be a sales pitch. By all means, come and talk to me. The purpose of me doing this session and the purpose of the last couple of slides is about you guys being able to do it. I do have, obviously, the reporting suite that you've just seen. So if you want to start from a standing start, you can have a conversation with me about what that looks like. But I say it's not difficult. If you've got the type of inquisitive mind, the key thing with all of the reporting stuff that I ever build, I say is fundraisers just need to be curious and just go off and explore your data. And sometimes that's difficult in CRM. So using tools like Power BI where you can take that out and blend it actually makes your life easier.
All right, next question here. Is it possible to create auto-generated reports and send to internal teams on set dates, like a quarterly comparison review sent on the first day of a quarter, for example?
So you can do that. You can do email subscriptions within Power BI, and it's one of the things I'm looking at for our other main reporting product, is being able to subscribe essentially to a dashboard. So you can pick the bits of the report that you care about, put them on a dashboard, and then you can have yourself or other members of your team subscribe to that dashboard, and then that gets delivered to your inbox. And you can look at it that way.
Great. Can you create dashboards on the results of Engaging Networks advocacy actions in Power BI?
Yes.
Yes. Awesome.
Don't think there's anything more complicated than that, but yes.
And then how is the data in Power BI used alongside other data sources, for example, Google Analytics?
That's a really interesting one. One of the things that I was trying to identify earlier today was whether we've got IP addresses in Engaging Networks data. And I'm looking at Corin, and Corin's shaking his head saying no. So it's a bit of a challenge. All you're going to be able to do is identify pages that people are hitting, and then you'll be able to look at that through Engaging Networks. It depends on what level of analytics you've got. I think there is an exciting piece to be done in terms of blending Engaging Networks data with Google Analytics data and putting it all into a mixing pot and seeing what you can do with it.
All right, and then can multiple APIs be plugged into Power BI simultaneously?
To get data, yes, because it's just getting data. To push data out, if you're planning on pushing it into, I don't know, CRM, for example, or .digital, it would require a little bit more complicated stuff. I've not done the pushing out. I've meddled with it, which is never a good place to be. But I have done lots of getting data. So I've got data from the Sky API, anybody using Razor's Edge 7. I've got data out of the Sky API and blended that with Engaging Networks data for one of my other customers.
Amazing. I think you've kind of answered this in some capacity, but how frequently do the reports or dashboards update?
So with Power BI, you can schedule them to update on an hourly basis. I think that's the most real time that you're going to get. But you have to remember what your data source is refreshing at. So again, if we're talking about Engaging Networks, I think most of the reporting stuff erring on the side of caution would update within an hour. But again, you just don't want to get record locking. So if you're refreshing on an hourly basis, you just need to think about the volume of data that you're refreshing, which is why I err on the side of caution and say do an overnight refresh, unless you really, really desperately need something faster than that.
Nice. Okay. Another question. Do you import any data from social channels about your social engagement?
I haven't done yet. That doesn't mean it can't be done. Power BI has got lots of connectors. One of the connectors is to Facebook, and I believe to the Twitter API. It keeps changing, and it keeps being built on. So there's lots of new stuff coming out on a regular basis. But you can connect Power BI to Facebook data, Facebook graph data. I've not done it because I've not had a customer come to me and ask me for it, but that doesn't mean it can't be done.
And then another question, how much of your data is auto-imported via APIs versus what needs to be manually set up? Are you doing any sort of manual, is there anything not available in the API that feeds in?
So most of the data that is imported into CRM from the Engaging Networks data, if we're talking about the integration stuff, we do offer the ability to code pages based on page names. So you can apply codes that match your Razor's Edge data, Thank You data, ARMS data, Dynamics data, whatever it is that you've got, so they make sense to you. I am always slightly terrified, just because I have that nervous disposition, to actually import stuff without people looking at it. So 9 times out of 10, I build a tool where you can look at the data first, and then you build import routines into whatever CRM system you've got. With regards to Power BI, again, you just need to think about it. I had another organization where spam transactions got through on Engaging Networks. It's few and far between, but when you look at the numbers and go, oh my God, they've raised £1 million, that's amazing. And then you realize it's £1 million in one transaction and go, something's not right here. So there are some things that you look at as soon as you get the visualizations and go, I need to investigate this further.
All right, and I think there's one more. How do we track conversions from advocacy to fundraising?
I would say the easiest way to do that is with tracking IDs. So the way that another organization's doing it is off the back of a petition or a hand raiser. They're basically doing the option to donate, and that donate page has got a different tracking ID on it. So we'll be able to, we are reporting on how many people are using that tracking ID. So we know that they must have taken a hand raiser action to be able to see that donation process. So having that donation with the tracking ID tells me it's an upsell from a hand raiser piece of work.
Great. And we got another question. Is the API into Power BI from Engaging Networks easy to set up, in your opinion? No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, relatively easy. You need a private token, so whoever's the super admin in your account, you need to have a conversation with them. And then once you've got that token, most of the documentation, I did most of this built using the documentation that's in the support tool. So have a look at that, have a conversation with support if you get really stuck, or come and message me and I'll quite happily have a conversation with you.
Great. Those are all the questions. Did anybody in the audience have anything? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.